Tony, is mortgaging our lives worth it to toil away in startups? Question for you.
Well, I just think it depends on what you're after, right? Because honestly, if I wasn't mortgaging away my life for my startup, I'd be mortgaging away my life for a 9 to 5. And I did that for years. So it's like one way or the other, you're having to pay. But I think I came to a realization a couple of years ago is that I don't know if I could ever want to go back to working for somebody else ever again.
Yeah, I say this all the time. People ask me, Ed, should I become a founder? And my first answer is no. Absolutely not. No way. Run in the other direction. It is not a good life. It is not the glamorous life that we talk about. The only reason you should do a startup is if it's in your blood and you can't possibly do anything else. I don't know about you, Tony, but as soon as you go through the startup cycle once, and you're in this world, you're talking about hiring
Yeah.
and like just are you employable? I don't think that we are employable, generally speaking, after we get through a startup. Like, let's say a startup goes and it folds, and we're a founder. I don't think we're employable anymore.
Well, the first thing I tell candidates who maybe were former founders is we probably need to update your titles and massage your experience a little bit because you do become a little radioactive in that sense of, you were a founder and a CEO and now, but I was really just a CEO of one, right? So it's like, okay, well, we gotta work that title back, right? But no, I agree that being a founder, it's not for everyone. A lot of people that I talk to is they did it because there's just not much else to do on the marketplace, right? They realize, hey, I can't find a job, so I might as well create a job for myself. So whether it's a product or a service, they end up kind of falling into it by chance or circumstance. And many of them didn't dream of becoming an entrepreneur. They just sort of like the path kind of led that way. And this is where they're at.
Yeah, and if it fits, that's great.
Yeah.
If you're in the audience or you're watching this on the intrawebs, on social media, any of our channels, would love to hear. Put in a comment. Why are you a founder? Could you see yourself doing anything else? Why not just go get a regular job? Jen, I'm going to point this to you. I know you don't like talking, but we're just going to drag you into this conversation. You've watched me advise hundreds of founders over the years. By the way, Jen is my executive operations. She just got married. Congratulations. She took a few days off, which made me realize she has more job security than ever. And I was struggling without her. But congratulations and kudos. Husband is a very lucky man. But Jen, you've watched us advise founders over the years. Would you ever become a founder? In your opinion, what is your opinion about people who become founders?
Is not in my blood.
Not in your,
I
why
do
not?
I
Why not?
do not have, I just don't have the desire. And I think part of it comes from growing up in a family business, going to work, talking about work, coming home, you're sitting around the table, you talk about work. And I've seen the unhealthy dynamic of it. I'm about to see the healthy side of it as my husband is a farmer and works with his family all day, all night. So I'm sure I'll see a different side of it then, but I think I just have a very skewed view of it. And I like to be able to just work, and I will, as Ed knows, I will work into the evenings. I'll work whatever hours a day, it doesn't matter, but I would like to be able to work. And then once I turn my computer off, I don't have to think about it ever again. And I'm okay with that.
Yeah, you can't turn it off. Tony, how do you do it? Or do you do it? Because it's 24/7. Like you are in this job 24/7. My family recognizes it. That is one of the detractors. What do you do?
Yeah, well, when I figure that out, I'll let you know, right? But I mean, it's definitely gotten better over the years trying to set boundaries for myself. And I think one of the big things that I always kind of preach to people in the marketplace or startups hiring is we've used the term work-life balance for so long that I don't even think it applies anymore, right? I like to use the term, work-life flexibility. And the reason is because our lives are so frenetic now, right? Both, mom and dad work. We got to run kids to school, the doctor's appointments. We've got, to let the cable guy in. And so really what it comes down to is I might need to take 2 hours off in the morning to go do some stuff. But that just means then I'll probably be back online at 7 o'clock after the kids go to bed. And I think creating that idea, the balance of like, hey, there's going to be some times where I'm going to work a little more. Sometimes, and it's not often, I'll work a little less. And then hopefully it all sort of nets out. But I mean, there's many a time where I'll be slacking other founders like at 10:30 at night because I'm trying to create something on Figma or Adobe, and
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
like I'm trying to learn and upskill, and so because during business hours, I'm talking to clients. And so it's like after hours is where I'm doing all the creative stuff, like the marketing and the create because it's got to get done. And then like the glamorous life of a eating top ramen and Gatorade while I'm like, trying to get this stuff done. So yeah, if you want to become a founder, just realize, it's a tough road, but I mean, it's fun.
It can be worth it for sure, especially if you like the freedom. But let me just do a public service announcement for the founders who are watching here. If you have an investor, you do not get to advocate for work-life balance. You get to advocate for things being fair, which is important. But if you have an investor, and investors come in and got 20% of the company, and you could possibly grow your company in a unicorn, $1 billion, and you are going to experience all the spoils of that, and you do that right, you don't get to say, I want work-life balance, because they gave you their money. There's a cost of opportunity. They could easily put it in the market. They're taking a risk. That's their livelihood as well. You owe it to them to put everything that you possibly can in your startup. However, you have to be wise. You cannot mortgage your own life to the point where it's detrimental to the startup, because then you're not actually fulfilling your obligations. So if you work yourself to the bone and you can't actually perform in your startup, well, then now you're totally screwed everybody. But when you have an investor, everything changes. And I don't think a lot of founders quite understand how that dynamic shifts as soon as you take that first check. Tony, what's been your experience?
Yeah, I mean, investment changes everything. And, I know you'll agree with this. The number one request that we hear from founders in the community is, I'm here to like try to find investors, right? It's it's like top of the list, right?
That is it. That is it.
And it just becomes like, it opens up an entirely new set of more complex problems and challenges, right? We think, oh, I got to check, we're cruising now. And it's just, no, you're being held accountable by other people who are financially involved. And it becomes more challenging in that sense. And investors, VCs in particular, they're going to look at how you are structured for the long run, because they realize it too. They see founder burnout. And if you're a one man, one woman operation, you think like, my plan is I'm just going to keep working. They're not going to find you overly investable, because they realize that you can't keep this up forever. And that's why oftentimes they hope that you have some sort of co-founder to kind of shoulder the load. So it's just one of those things where having a really succinct plan of like, here are the milestones and what we're going to do within reason, you have to like map it out for them, right? Just going in with a hope and a prayer, and I'm going to work really hard and we're going to do all these things. It's not going to provide investor confidence. And honestly, you will just burn out faster.
100%. And I'm just going to be straightforward. If someone is a solo founder, depending on Tony's point, I start to worry if I'm going to recommend to investor, or I'm sitting there, I got to present to investor committee, or I'm the general partner and I'm responsible for writing a check of LP's money. Single founders are worrisome. They worry me. Now, some totally impress me and I'm like, okay, we can hire people, etc. But it's just because of the natural load that goes into startups. Right?
Well, especially if they're a first time founder and they've never done it before, right? I mean, that they need extra guardrails, but it presents an interesting question, because I get asked all the time, do I need a co-founder? And I'm like, well, right, there's not a right or wrong answer. It depends.
I got a founder right now, and I've been advising him for years now, and he's solo. He has a family member helping him, and really kind of a silent financial person, but he constantly is talking about co-founder and trying to actually get me on his team, which whole other story, full disclosure. But I get it. I actually consider it, and I think about it because it's that much work, especially because he's impressed me that he's gotten like $500,000 in revenue by himself over the last couple of years. Totally cool, right?
Yeah.
Jen, I saw the comments light up. We got a comment
From Chris, just said nothing like the feeling of vision coming to life and then going live.
And that is something that a lot of founders love experiencing, right? Working on a vision and then saying, hey, I can make it happen. That's so gratifying, especially founders who are driven by a purpose. They want to solve a problem instead of, oh, I'm just going to make some money or I got nothing else to do. They care about that. Kudos, Chris. Thanks for sharing. Make sure everyone get your questions in. Tony, I wanted to talk quickly about fundraising. That's always a hot topic. Let's do one for you and one for me. Okay, so here's the question I'm going to ask is, how do you show investors that you've got the right team? And how do you get that team that investors will be impressed with versus, oh, got some guy off the street, or, oh, this is a convenient person? What do investors want to look for? And how would you advise a founder to round out that team?
So I think, anytime you're going into an investment presentation, you become a storyteller, right? And what you have to do is you have to be able to paint a picture of what the enterprise looks like as a whole, right? And I think there's a bunch of different contributing pieces that go into that, right? And that makeup. And one of the first things that investors are going to look at is like, okay, where is everyone strong? And then where are the gaps within the team and the leadership? And are they balanced out, right? So if we see that we've got three very technical co-founders, but nobody is really kind of focused on the go-to-market strategy, how to be a good operator, how to kind of drive things to that next level working with the customers. That creates a lot of pause because there's no doubt you could probably build a beautiful product that functions really well, but if you can't sell it, then that becomes a huge red flag, right? So I think that's one component, is making sure like, hey, do you have all your bases covered? I think subject matter expertise and background, right? So just really like, where have you worked in the past? Have you worked for other startups? Have you come from the Googles or the Ubers of the world? Creates a lot of confidence. Now, I'll say that doesn't always mean that they're going to be very good at being a founder.
Sure.
Right. But it does give a level of, okay, those are tough places to work and excel. So it does help a lot. And then the other piece as well is just kind of what is the plan to continue to expand with the team, right? So whether it's having the right advisors on board that are focused within the niche industries, right? So if I'm working in, ed tech, that's where I'm going after. Do I have the right advisory team on there? Because what I want to know as an investor is, okay, I've given you my money. What's the path forward to successfully penetrate it and expand upon the traction that you've already created?
Let's talk about an example. Google. Tony, you sparked this. Larry Page, Sergey Brin, two techies, total techies, right? They just decided, hey, we think we can do a better job at helping people search and indexing the World Wide Web. Google's the behemoth. It's Alphabet now. It was Larry Page. He was the first CEO. They were tech guys, and they really hit their stride, though, when they hired their first CEO, which was Schmidt, right? So Eric Schmidt took over and really pump that up because this was a business guy that was coming in, right? And so investors want to see that you know how to build the team to round out the team, make sure you're not just hiring a bunch of tech bros that all of you do the same thing. And what happens is founders that can't do that, investors will actually start to question. So I had a founder, curious how you'd address this, Tony. I had a founder who built a great product, was getting good traction, and had sales, great customer acquisition costs, could nail it, exactly knew their return on ad spend, all that stuff, right? Great kid. Love that kid. Self-taught. He was in front of an investor, could have written the check that he needed, and he'd been raising money, but they said to him, we don't believe that you can hire the right team to scale this all the way. We haven't seen you grab that landmark hire, that one executive, steal him away from another venture, or have someone with such a pedigree be convinced to come over. He was kind of playing small ball with like B-list actors, and they want to see him go and hire an A-lister, and he couldn't. There was resistance from him getting that investment check. What would you do?
Well, funnily enough, because this is what I do, is I would go work with like a really, really good advisor or recruiter that can kind of help bring that A-list player, because, a good recruiter is honestly worth its weight in gold, because really they become an extension of your business and they help advocate. And basically what they do is they sell the vision of the founder to that talent and back and forth and brings them together. They're a connector, right? And so when I hear these stories about founders who haven't been able to find the right talent, it's not surprising because, sometimes we're so close to the business and working in it that sometimes it's hard to focus on some of the strategic components as well, just from a bandwidth perspective. And so having the, kind of the wherewithal to know I need to tap into resources, whether it's an advisor or my network, to really kind of help me find that next piece to scale the business, I think is a really, really savvy move.
I had a story of a founder, and I was helping her raise capital, smart as a whip. I'd go work for her any day of the week. Totally amazing. And I've mentored young female entrepreneurs who become CEOs of big companies and mentor them to this day. And I believe and I'm flat out, I'm going to say it, I'm not trying to win brownie points, but I believe any woman can outcompete any man in the boardroom when it comes to a startup because of empathy, and being sexist, but I think women have a specific type of empathy that men we just gloss over, and just their perspective and their ability to nurture a company and create better solutions, I think, for certain types of things. I've seen it happen, and I've seen good solid returns for investors. But the truth of the matter is that a lot of that is based on signal bias or recency bias in what people are looking at investors. And I have lots of people complain, yeah, investors are just a whole bunch of old white dudes sitting in a room, want to be part of the club, and they're used to investing in a certain way. And I get it. At the same time, there are certain things that you have to have as an executive, that sense, because this investor, we got her to the senior partner and the last due diligence, and she was doing great. But he just said flat out, we don't see you leading and managing, right? She wasn't sending off the right signals. And I had to coach her, and I had to say, listen, you got to kind of be a hard ass a little bit and really push him on some stuff and push back. And if you do all these things and he still doesn't want to invest, well, then he's not the investor for you. But we all need to learn those executive skills to be able to get that team, to be able to manage, to be able to have influence and inspire and share stories and be authentic in the boardroom and talk to investors and the board, at the same time defend your people and shelter them from all the pressure of the public markets, if that's what you're dealing with, public opinion. All that goes into you as a founder, and investors are looking at that and they're imagining you leading a team of 3,000 people because you need to go unicorn. That's what it all boils down to, Tony.
Yeah, I think you raised a lot of, interesting points there. I think first off, it's really exciting to see, more diversity in a lot of the VC groups out there. Like, they're skewing younger. We're getting away from kind of that classic over 50 white male demographic. And I think we're starting to see that reflective in emerging VC firms. And I think they're looking for diversity in their founders and just increasing that opportunity. The other thing as well is one of the first things I did years ago is I hired myself an executive coach that I see, once a month. And that's been really valuable because I'm smart enough to know what I know, but I'm also smart enough to know what I don't know. And that's been a big thing for me is okay, where are my gaps? Because again, we usually have some sort of singular background, right? So my background was sales. I wasn't technical at all, right? Just like somebody might be technical and they might not be an operator. And so having the ability to become more well-rounded, and we have to be able to do that, it's a skill that we have to learn, and handling yourself in a board presence. Now, that doesn't mean that you have to be necessarily a larger than life personality, but I think it's having the confidence to believe in yourself and what you're trying to create and saying, you know what, that's okay. If you're an investor and you don't believe I can do it, I don't want your money anyway. Exactly. I will go to somebody else that will. There's plenty of people out there that will do this.
Right on. And we have the amazing pleasure, I just look at the people who are in our audience, the mix of founders, minorities of all different shapes and sizes. I've seen them come, I've seen them go. My only thing is, don't act entitled. Just because you're part of this minority class doesn't mean we're going to treat you any special. It's still a meritocracy, but you have equal right and equal opportunity to show your stuff. And if you're out there and you are struggling and you are running headfirst into this type of stuff, I'm going to tell you, just let us know. We're going to support you. We'll spend extra time coaching you. It's the great thing. Okay, we got time for one more question.
All right. Unless you can answer this in 60 seconds, Tony. Can you list a few other hiring mistakes that would potentially hurt future fundraising? Example, hiring only B quality candidates, like mentioned earlier.
Yeah, don't hire too fast. Don't commit too much. So, again, contracts, being able to hire fast, fire fast. If it's not a good fit, you're not going to know. People can dazzle you in an interview, but you're just not going to know until you get in there. So yeah, any way that you can mitigate risk by just trial assignments, contracts, working agreements, things like that. If it's not a fit, you just exit them right out.
Put a nail in this one here and just explain it from a standpoint of investors. You are going to have to defend your cap table. So if you bring on a wonky hire, give them a wonky salary, and you give them tons of equity, that investor is going to make you defend your cap table. And if you do not have a good excuse that makes business sense, then you're not going to get that investment. So just think ahead of time. Every decision you make when you hire, if you need to raise future rounds, you're going to have to defend your cap table and defend every single dollar and what you put in to these employees. So that's going to change the way that you hire right in the beginning.
I would rather be generous in providing compensation the way of commissions. If I were to bring on a salesperson and something that would incentivize them versus a high base and a bunch of equity, it's multiple components, but that's how you insulate yourself against just blowing through your capital. Make them basically perform to make their money.
Okay, Jen, do we have another question we can answer in 60 seconds or are we good?
We do. We got one more. What is your process like for interviewing developers? Do you ask them logical questions or just straightforward resume experience? how do you actually tell if someone's smart and good at what they do?
Let me
Yeah. So just
answer. Let me
go.
answer in 30 seconds, and then you add.
Go.
Because I'm non-technical, when I interview a technical person, I don't ask any technical questions. I ask questions about culture fit, how they handle conflict resolution. Then I bring in a technical person to ask the technical questions, and then I ask their opinion, and then I make them do a project, and I say, let's try something together. And I have the technical person give me their feedback, and then I see how did I work with them, how did they engage with me, what's the chemistry like, and the technical person signs off on their work. That's how I do it.
Yeah, I would co-sign that. I just say is like, hey, beware technical tests because they're not usually reflective of somebody's true aptitude. I think it can give you kind of insights, but they're not necessarily a real world application because it's like when you go take something in high school, you're not going to use that knowledge 20 years in the real world.
Thank you, Tony. That was great. Thank you to everyone who asked those questions.